Shadow work asks you to do something most people spend their entire lives refusing to do. It asks you to turn toward the voice that says you are not enough. Not to argue with it. Not to drown it out with affirmations. But to actually look at it. The inner critic is one of the densest concentrations of shadow material a person carries, and underneath it is something almost no one expects to find. Most of us know the inner critic well. It is the voice that says you should have done better. That other people have it together and somehow you do not. That your feelings are too much, or that you have no right to them at all. We spend enormous energy managing this voice, arguing with it, ignoring it, or performing a confidence we do not actually feel in order to drown it out. None of that works for long. Jung understood this voice as part of what he called the shadow. Specifically, as a cluster of internalized judgments absorbed from the world outside and turned inward over time. The criticisms your caregivers repeated until you began repeating them yourself. The standards your environment demanded without offering much grace for falling short. The moments when you were shamed, and the only way to make sense of it was to agree with the person doing the shaming. Because agreeing felt safer than the alternative. Here is what most approaches to the inner critic miss. The goal is not to destroy it, not to override it. In Jungian depth psychology, the goal is to understand it, to look at it clearly enough to see what it is actually doing. Because beneath every inner critic is a frightened protector. A part of you that learned very early that if you criticized yourself first, harshly enough and thoroughly enough, then maybe you could prevent others from doing it to you. Maybe you could stay ahead of the rejection. Maybe you could control the outcome by becoming your own harshest judge before anyone else got the chance. That strategy made sense once. For a child in an unpredictable environment, it was actually quite intelligent. The problem is that the strategy never got updated. The critic that once protected you is still running now, applying the same logic to a completely different life. Viktor Frankl wrote that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose your own attitude toward any set of circumstances. Your inner critic is a set of circumstances. You did not choose it. But today we are going to choose how we relate to it. And that relationship, once shifted, changes everything. This session is for educational and reflective purposes only, and is not a substitute for professional mental health support. If the inner critic in your life is connected to deep childhood wounds or persistent low mood, please seek support alongside this practice. What we do here works best as a complement to professional care. Grab something to write with. A journal, or the Notes app on your phone, or anything you have nearby. If nothing is close, just stay with this and hold the prompts in your mind. Find a position that feels settled, both feet on the floor if you can. And take one breath to signal to yourself that this time is yours. The first thing we are going to do is the most important and the most uncomfortable. We are going to let the inner critic speak out loud on the page without filtering it. I want you to write everything your inner critic says about you. Every harsh judgment. Every comparison to someone else. Every prediction of failure. Every self-critique that usually starts with, "You should have done this," or "You should have been that." Do not soften it. Do not argue back. Just transcribe it as if you are reporting what someone else is saying. You may notice an urge to minimize, to write something like, "I am sometimes a little hard on myself," instead of what the voice actually says in its worst moments. Try to resist that. Write the real version. No one is going to read this but you. Whenever you are ready, take about 1 more minute. Slowly bring that to a close and look at what you wrote. You may notice it is harsher than you would ever speak to another person. Most people are genuinely shocked when they write it out in full, at how relentless the voice actually is. You have been living with this as background noise so constant it registers as your own thinking, without fully registering how brutal it has been. Take a moment to acknowledge that. Not to feel worse about it, just to see it clearly. Now we are going to look at where this voice came from, because you were not born with it. No child is born with an inner critic. It was installed by the environment, and that means it can be examined. Pick one line from what you wrote, one criticism that feels the most familiar, the one that has been with you the longest, the one that sounds most like a fact about you, even though it is not. Write it at the top of a fresh page. Now ask yourself whose voice this is. Not as a rhetorical exercise, but as a genuine trace. When was the first time you heard this kind of message? Was it a caregiver? A teacher? Sibling? A peer group? A culture or set of beliefs that told you what you needed to be in order to belong? You might get a clear memory, a specific face, or a specific set of words. You might get only a feeling, a general sense of the environment the voice came from. Either is valuable. Write whatever arrives. Here is something important, and I want to say it plainly. This exercise is not about blame. Understanding where something came from is not the same as staying angry about it. We are simply following the trail back, because a voice that has an origin is not the truth. It is a learned pattern, and learned patterns, once seen clearly, can change. Now we go one layer deeper. This is the part that tends to shift things. I want you to consider what your inner critic was trying to protect you from. If it told you that you were not good enough, what was it trying to prevent? Rejection or failure, humiliation in front of people whose opinion felt essential to your survival. If it told you to work harder and need less, what was it afraid would happen if you did not comply? Take a moment to write your answer to this. My inner critic was trying to protect me from, and then write whatever comes. Now read what you wrote. You may notice something unexpected here. A kind of tenderness or sadness toward this part of you. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of integration. That is what it feels like when you stop fighting a part of yourself and start understanding it. Carl Rogers believed that beneath every defended or difficult behavior is a legitimate human need. A need that has not yet found a safe way to be expressed. Your inner critic needed you to be safe. It just learned a very harsh method of trying to provide that safety. We are not going to agree with those methods, but we can acknowledge what the critic was trying to do. And that acknowledgement is what begins to loosen its hold. The final part of today's practice is a gentle rewrite. Take the original criticism you wrote at the top of the page. Read it one more time. Now, write a response to it. Not a denial. Not a forced affirmation. Something more honest than either of those. Something you might say to a close friend who came to you carrying this exact criticism about themselves. The kind of response that does not dismiss the feeling, but also does not agree that it is the whole truth. You might write something like this. I can see you are afraid of failing. That fear makes sense given what you have been through. And I do not think that fear is the most reliable guide to what is actually true about you. Whatever feels honest and kind for your specific situation. It does not need to be eloquent. It just needs to be true and gentle. Read what you wrote. Whatever you wrote is not a platitude. That is your own wisdom speaking to your own wound. That voice has always been there. We are just practicing letting it be louder. Take a breath and come back to the room. What we did today was a version of what Jung called active imagination. Engaging with an inner figure as if it were a separate entity with its own history and its own logic. The inner critic is not you. It is a part of you. Parts can be understood and negotiated with over time. Integration does not mean the critic disappears. It means you stop mistaking it for reality. It means when you hear you are not enough, there is a little more space between that thought and your full identification with it. That gap is where your freedom lives. It starts small, but it grows the more you practice this kind of looking. Your practice between now and the next session is this. When you hear the critic speak, try not to argue with it, and try not to collapse into it. Just pause and ask it what it is trying to protect you from right now. That question alone begins to change the relationship. Thank you for doing this today. The inner critic is one of the loudest voices in shadow work, and turning toward it takes real courage. A reminder that this session is for educational and reflective purposes only, and is not a substitute for professional mental health support. If what came up today felt significant, please consider reaching out to a qualified therapist. Here is something I want to ask you genuinely. What does your inner critic say to you most often? Not the whole list. Just the loudest line. Leave it in the comments. The habit of criticizing yourself survives in silence, and naming it even once begins to change that. If this session gave you something, clicking the like button helps someone else find it tonight. And subscribing means a new session is here every Monday and Friday. Our next session goes into the roots of what the critic feeds on. If this session helped you process something difficult, our sleep meditation channel can help you rest from it. The part of you that resisted this exercise most is the part that needed it most. Link in description. Until next time, keep going gently.